So if you walk through a forest, right, and you see this massive oak tree just suddenly collapse, it's really easy to blame the wind.
Oh, absolutely. The wind is the obvious culprit in that moment.
Right. But the truth is, I mean, a healthy tree doesn't just fall over in a breeze. Long before the canopy ever showed, like, any visible signs of decay, the soil composition changed.
Exactly. A blight quietly took hold in the root system.
Yeah, fungi began compromising the structural integrity beneath the earth. And by the time the tree actually falls, the invisible environment that caused it has been brewing for decades.
Which is really the core challenge in neurodegenerative disease.
Mm.
We have historically diagnosed these conditions at the exact moment the tree falls, when the motor symptoms just become undeniable.
Instead of studying the soil.
Right, instead of studying the soil that allowed the pathology to take root in the first place.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are on a mission with you to uncover what Parkinson's disease looks like before the rest of the world can actually see it.
It's a huge shift in how we think about this.
It really is. And this is our fourth and final deep dive based on Leop Portal's incredibly moving written Parkinson series, which she co-authored with Dr. Minna Schmidt.
Yes, and specifically, today we are focusing on the culmination of their work. The title is The Buck Institute, the Microbiome, and the Data Parkinson's Research Still Needs.
Which really brings this whole journey together. I mean, if we think about where we started, we've spent our last few conversations watching this disease move from the shadows of a private family living room directly into the global spotlight.
We really have. We started by looking at Leah Portal's uncle, Henry Portal.
Right, the family memory.
Exactly. He stumbled and lost his balance, and his family simply lacked the medical context to read those early visible signs.
They just didn't know what they were looking at.
And from that private confusion, we moved to the second deep dive. We watched Michael J. Fox take his own visible struggle and engineer it into a massive global research infrastructure.
Which was huge, because he proved that visibility could actually become a data-gathering system. Fox Insight, the biomarkers, all of that patient data.
Yes. And then in the third deep dive, we look at Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne.
That one was heavy. It really gave us a profound look at caregiver visibility.
It did. The world saw Ozzy's public decline, but they completely misunderstood the timeline. They were mistaking neurodegeneration for just, the wear and tear of a rock and roll lifestyle.
And Sharon showed us the invisible weight of caregiving. She represented the families who are, honestly, always the first true researchers in any household. They're tracking the subtle shifts long before a doctor ever gives them a formal name.
Which brings us directly to the research layer today. We're asking what Parkinson's research still cannot fully see.
And what it practically needs to look earlier.
Right. Because if the previous deep dives were about the moment the disease crosses into visibility, true scientific progress requires us to look at the invisible environment, that biological soil.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when we talk about the environment that allows Parkinson's to develop, we kind of have to talk about aging.
It is the fundamental component, yes.
But I think, most of us just view aging as the calendar pages turning. It's just wear and tear. But in this context, it sounds like aging is actually the weather system that creates the perfect storm for Parkinson's to develop.
That is a perfect way to phrase it. And that shift in perspective is the entire foundation of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging.
Which is a pretty unique place, right?
Oh, absolutely. They are the very first independent biomedical institute in the world focused solely on aging. And this is where we meet Dr. Minna Schmidt.
Who is a dedicated researcher in the Anderson lab there.
Yes, and her drive isn't just academic, it's deeply personal. Her own family member was diagnosed 14 years ago.
Wow, 14 years.
Yeah, so that personal connection really pushes her to seek therapies that are fast, safe, and effective. And the Buck Institute approaches aging not as just this passive background process, but as a highly active, measurable biological process.
So it's a physical mechanism. It's not just a concept of time passing.
Exactly. Scientists have actually identified the 12 hallmarks of aging.
12 of them?
Yes. This includes things like chronic inflammation and cellular senescence, which is where cells stop dividing, but they refuse to die. They just sit there secreting inflammatory chemicals.
Oh, like zombie cells.
Basically, yes.
Oh.
And another hallmark is dysbiosis, which is a fundamental imbalance in your gut microbiome.
And this matters because Parkinson's is intrinsically connected to all of this.
Deeply connected. You cannot fully understand Parkinson's if you only look at the dopamine-producing neurons in the brain in total isolation. You have to study the aging body as the overarching climate that allows neurodegeneration to take hold over a decade or more.
But, I mean, if aging is the climate that allows the blight to grow, where exactly does the very first seed get planted?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because we always assume Parkinson's starts in the brain, right? Since that's where the motor control is lost. But the research is pointing somewhere entirely different.
It brings us to the brake hypothesis. Have you heard of this before?
I read about it in the source material, but it's a little complex.
It is. It's a prominent scientific framework suggesting that Parkinson's doesn't actually originate in the motor centers of the brain.
Wait, really? Not in the brain?
Well, instead, it starts in one of two places. Either the gastrointestinal system, which researchers call the body-first subtype, or the olfactory bulb, which controls my sense of smell. And they call that the brain-first subtype.
The gut or the sense of smell. I'm assuming that's because those are like the two primary interfaces where our internal biology constantly interacts with the outside world.
Spot on. Every single time you eat or take a breath, you're introducing external bacteria, toxins, and chemicals directly into those highly sensitive tissues.
So what actually happens when those tissues get triggered?
Well, the theory proposes that an environmental trigger causes a specific protein called alpha-synuclein to misfold.
Okay, alpha-synuclein.
Right. In a healthy state, proteins have a very specific 3D shape that dictates how they function. But when alpha-synuclein misfolds, it loses its functional shape and it becomes sticky.
Sticky, like it clumps together.
Exactly. It starts clumping together, forming these aggregates called Lewy bodies.
Oh.
And the crucial, terrifying mechanism here is that these aggregates act almost like a prion.
Meaning they infect other proteins?
Yes. They physically bump into other perfectly healthy alpha-synuclein proteins and cause them to misfold too.
Wow. Like a chain reaction of decay just spreading through the root system.
That's exactly what it is.
But okay, if this chain reaction starts in the gut, how does a misfolded protein in your stomach navigate all the way up into the brain to cause motor tremors? I mean, those are pretty far apart.
They are, but they are connected through the gut-brain axis, specifically via the vagus nerve.
Ah, the vagus nerve.
Right. It's the 10th cranial nerve, and it basically acts as a massive neural superhighway connecting your entire gastrointestinal tract directly to your brainstem.
And there's data backing this up, right?
Overwhelming data. In the Fox Insight database, which gathers longitudinal data from thousands of patients, roughly 81% of participants reported experiencing significant gastrointestinal issues.
Like severe constipation.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes a full decade before they ever received a clinical diagnosis for Parkinson's.
A decade?
Yes. The disease was slowly traveling up the vagus nerve that entire time.
Wait, hold on. I was reading through the source material, and it mentioned a procedure called a vagotomy, which is physically severing the vagus nerve as a way to reduce the risk of developing Parkinson's.
Yes, that is in the literature.
But you're talking about surgically cutting a major neural connection in the human body. Isn't that incredibly dangerous? I mean, that sounds like using a sledgehammer to fix a leaky pipe. There has to be a better way than just disconnecting your organs from your brain.
What's fascinating here is that researchers aren't suggesting a vagotomy as a preventative treatment for the general public, precisely because it is such a sledgehammer approach.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, no doctor's recommending that today. But historically, vagotomies were performed to treat severe peptic ulcers long before modern medication existed.
Okay, so they have old data on people who had this done.
Exactly. When scientists looked back at the epidemiological data of patients who had that surgery decades ago, they found their risk of developing Parkinson's was drastically lower.
Wow, so it works.
It serves as a biological proof of concept. If the misfolded alpha-synuclein proteins use the vagus nerve to climb up into the brain, and you cut the road, the traffic simply cannot get through.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If dysbiosis, this bad bacterial communication in the soil of the gut, is the spark that initiates the misfolding and the vagus nerve is the pathway, does that mean fixing the gut microbiome could stop the traffic? Like without needing to physically cut the nerve?
That is the exact question driving Dr. Minna Schmidt's research. She is looking at how we can heal that gut-brain highway today.
And what are they finding?
Well, currently, the absolute best medicine we have for Parkinson's, the most effective intervention to slow its progression and protect the brain, isn't an experimental pill.
It's not a drug?
No. It is high-intensity exercise. things like rock-steady boxing or intense Tai Chi.
Right, but we really need to move past the generic advice that exercise is good for you. I mean, how is working out acting as a targeted medicine for a neurodegenerative disease? What is the actual biological mechanism at play here?
It comes down to evolutionary survival
Yeah.
mechanisms and how your nervous system allocates resources.
Okay, so like the fight or flight response.
Exactly. When you engage in high-intensity exercise, your body activates the sympathetic nervous system. You enter that fight or flight state. To keep your muscles firing, your brain produces norepinephrine, which actively constricts the blood vessels in your non-essential organs.
Like your stomach and intestines.
Right. And it forces that blood flow into your skeletal muscles, your heart, and your lungs.
Because, I mean, if you are sprinting away from a predator,
Right.
your body entirely shuts down digestion. It redirects all the power to the engines that will keep you alive.
Exactly. But the magic actually happens in the recovery phase. When you stop exercising, the parasympathetic nervous system takes over.
The rest and digest state.
Yes. Blood rushes back to the gastrointestinal tract to resume digestion and tissue repair. And the function of this GI tract is heavily regulated by the vagus nerve.
So it's like a pump.
Exactly. When you engage in interval training, you are rapidly toggling blood flow back and forth. You are forcing the vagus nerve to adapt to intense stress and then subsequent recovery.
Which strengthens it.
It increases what we call vagal tone.
Yeah.
You are physically conditioning the nerve to be more resilient against pathological spread.
That is wild. You're essentially taking your vagus nerve to the gym. You're forcing the root system to build up its resilience against the disease.
Yes, but it goes even deeper than that. The source material notes that exercise doesn't just train the nerve, it literally changes the soil composition.
Meaning it alters the bacteria in the microbiome itself.
It does. Physical exertion fundamentally shifts the microbial populations in your gut. There is a highly specific, very memorable detail in the research regarding a bacterium called Lactoplantobacillus plantarum tana.
I remember reading about this. This was the bacteria from the athlete, right?
Yes. Scientists actually isolated this specific bacterial strain from the gut of a gold medal weightlifter.
Which is just incredible to think about.
It is. And when they studied it in animal models, they found that introducing this bacterium enhances exercise performance, motivation, and muscle growth.
But the mind-blowing part to me is how it increases motivation. It isn't just like making the muscles more efficient. It is acting through metabolic pathways in the gut that indirectly signal the brain to increase dopamine production.
Exactly.
The bacteria in your stomach are essentially sending biochemical text messages to your brain, telling it to go for a run, and then rewarding it with dopamine when it does. That is unreal.
The gut microbiome can literally influence the neurochemistry of motivation. And if we can map out these bacterial communications, we might find entirely new, non-invasive therapeutic avenues for Parkinson's.
That would change everything.
It would. But translating these insights into widespread cures requires massive, long-term, longitudinal observation. We have to move from physical action on the part of the patient-like exercise to broad scientific participation.
Which means we need a total reframing of what medical research actually entails. Because, most people hear medical research or clinical trial, and they picture being strapped to a hospital bed, taking some experimental compound with terrifying side effects.
Oh, definitely. We view research as an invasive procedure done to us.
Right. But that's not what we're talking about here.
Not at all. That misconception drastically slows down scientific progress. The vast majority of early-stage medical research is just non-invasive observation.
Just watching and recording?
Yes. It is looking for patterns in the invisible layer before the visible motor symptoms ever appear. Dr. Minna Schmidt's current work in the Anderson lab is a perfect example of this.
What exactly is she doing?
She is utilizing bioinformatics and advanced AI modeling, partnering with Amazon Web Services and an AI solutions company called Compass UOL.
Okay, bringing in the heavy tech.
Yes, to analyze massive sets of human microbiome and health data sourced from Fox Insight.
But how does an AI model actually do that? Because we throw the term AI around a lot these days. How does an algorithm look at biological data from the gut and connect it to a disease of the brain?
Well, machine learning models excel at finding multivariate fingerprints in massive data sets.
Patterns that are just way too subtle for a human doctor to notice.
Exactly. Let's look at smartwatch data, for example. A gyroscope in your watch isn't just tracking the total number of steps you take. It measures step length, velocity, and symmetry.
So it knows exactly how you're moving.
Yes. If an AI algorithm detects a micro-hesitation or a slight asymmetry in your gait, that has been slowly developing over, say, 3 years, that alone might just be an issue.
Right, you kicked your knee playing tennis.
But the AI cross-references that micros stumble with, accelerometer data showing fragmented sleep patterns, and self-reported clinical data noting severe constipation.
Oh, wow.
It is the convergence of those tiny, seemingly unrelated variables that creates the biological fingerprint of Parkinson's, long before a visible tremor ever starts.
So what does this all mean? The AI models are ready, but they are starving. They are only as good as the longitudinal data you feed them.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the practical call of this entire deep dive. Research needs more than just a ribbon or an awareness campaign. It needs scientific collaboration, it needs immense funding, and above all, it desperately needs patient data.
And contributing that data is astonishingly simple today.
Because the devices are already doing it?
Yes, the invisible signs of Parkinson's, the micro movements, the resting heart rate shifts, the changes in REM sleep, they are already being tracked.
By the phones in our pockets and the watches on our wrists.
Exactly. By securely connecting health apps to research databases like Rune Labs or the Michael J. Fox Foundation's initiatives, patients can give scientists the exact data sets required to train these predictive models.
It's so easy.
It requires no lab visits. You just connect, select the data you want to share, and contribute.
The irony here is just staggering to me. We freely give our behavioral data to tech companies every single day.
We don't even think about it.
We let a social media algorithm analyze the micro hesitations in our scrolling habits just so it can sell us a targeted ad for a pair of shoes. We trade our privacy for convenience without a second thought.
But the moment medical researchers ask for our step count,
Exactly. The moment they ask for our sleep data to help decode neurodegeneration, the data that could literally hold the cure is suddenly locked away in our phones because of this misplaced sense of privacy. We are encrypting the cure while giving away our consumer habits for free.
if we connect this to the bigger picture, visibility, whether it is a patient showing a symptom or an AI tracking a digital biomarker, is only useful when it is organized into infrastructure.
It has to have a system.
Michael J. Fox proved this when he took his public visibility and built a system that coordinates data and clinical trials. But that multi-million-dollar infrastructure sits completely empty, without the ongoing participation of everyday people.
Let's bring this entire journey together. Think about the incredible arc this series has taken us on.
It really has been a profound journey.
It started with a quiet family memory. Liette Portal watching her uncle, Henry Portal, struggling with visible symptoms that the family didn't know how to interpret.
A completely private struggle.
Right. And then that deeply personal visibility expanded into public visibility, with cultural icons like Ozzy Osbourne showing the world the misunderstood reality of public decline.
And Sharon Osbourne laying bare the invisible, exhausting weight of caregiving, showing the stage visibility that so many families endure alone.
And from that public awareness, we watched the scientific community respond. We saw the creation of global research infrastructure, paving the way for scientists like Dr. Minna Schmidt at the Buck Institute to study the fundamental biology of aging.
They are mapping the gut-brain axis. They are proving the power of exercise to increase vagal tone.
And utilizing artificial intelligence to find the disease in the dark. It is a complete evolution from a family's confusion in a living room to the cutting edge of AI data modeling.
And that brings us to the final missing piece.
The data and participation that Parkinson's research still desperately needs from you. If you want to explore every detail of this deeply moving journey, Liette Portal's full-written Parkinson's series continues across a total of 8 episodes on the Liette Show Substack.
We highly urge you to go read the full text.
We really do. It is a profound piece of multi-domain storytelling that connects the deeply personal to the highly scientific.
This raises an important question. Right now, in your pocket, your smartphone has tracked your resting heart rate, your daily steps, and the fragmentation of your sleep for the last 5 years.
It knows you better than you know yourself.
It does. So what if the cure for the most devastating neurodegenerative diseases of the next decade isn't waiting to be discovered in a test tube, but is already hiding in the mundane, invisible data you generated just by walking to the grocery store today?
What if the key to saving the forest is already buried in the soil, and we just need to be willing to let the scientists look at it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.